So, Paul, you spent a few years working at Sound City before it was closed off to the public in 2011 for a period of time. Sound City, of course, is one of the most important studios in rock and roll history. What was the vibe like at the studio before it shut down?
It was a funky place. I mean, Sound City was, in an industrial complex and just kind of, had the brown carpet, and it was just, no matter how many times you vacuumed or wiped things off, it just didn't seem clean. And, so it was, but between that console and what was going on in that drum room, what was coming out of there was world class. It wasn't posh, but, people who understood what that studio was all about can totally take advantage of, hey, it's not as expensive as these other places around town, and it has a Neve desk, it's been properly maintained, and hey, just wash your hands. It was the people. The people there cared, and it's it's not the fanciest studio in town, but it's hey, we care, we're gonna go the extra mile, and we're gonna I'm going to help whoever the engineer is while I was the assistant, or even when I was a runner. Hey, I'm going to take your food order. I'm going to make sure everything's correct. I'm going to check the food when I come back. I mean, this is the whole thing of going from the runner desk to being an assistant engineer. How can Siobhan, studio manager, trust a runner who can't get a food order together correctly to, for her to trust that person going into a studio and making the right patch for whoever client comes in? It's a lot of attention to detail. So that was kind of her vetting things out. And, I got in there and it was just a fun, great place. So, she was the manager, and she rallied the guys, and, she'd hire everybody, and, obviously everyone had to work together, and, everyone kind of had to fit in. And she created a really cool, group of guys. And it's there's Nick Raskulinecz, there's Greg Fiddleman, there's Billy Joe Bowers, Joe Barisi was in there. All those guys came out of Sound City, and now I'm one of them. My other friend who came out of there, Josh Smith, he's another guy. And then there's Miles Wilson, who actually the whole reason why there was a void to fill in the assistant engineering spot, he moved on to work with the Pixies, and now he's their front of house guy, that tours around all over the world, and he's just great at it. I was already freelance by this point. And I was working on the Evanescence record, and all of a sudden I get a text from Siobhan, and she's rest in peace, Sound City. And I was I texted her back, I'm what happened? And she's they're selling off the gear, so I told Nick, and he talked to Dave Grohl, and other friends talked to Dave Grohl, and next thing you know, he's buying the console because this other guy was going to buy it and just part it out. And so Dave got in there, and they were having a hard time. So, it's, you got a big studio with staff, and you have artists who are on tighter budgets that don't want to spend any money, or the labels just don't have the budgets. They just keep cutting the budgets in half. So, a lot of studios around town had to figure that out.
That's cool how you all rallied around it.
It's a small community. So when Chris Cornell passed, it's hey, everybody feels that. It's he came into Sound City. It's we did a Rick Rubin session, and this was before Audio Slave, but Rick Rubin put, hey, I'm doing this song. I need to do this track for Spider-Man or whatever movie. And it was Rage Against the Machine, basically. And then Chris Cornell came in to sing the vocal. And that was kind of the beginning of that. So I remember I had to pick him up I had a 63 Comet. It wasn't super tight. It was cool looking, but, it was a sketchy ride because it's 4-wheel drum brakes and, straight 6, engine, and it wasn't fast or powerful, and it was just kind of a cruiser. But I had to go pick him up and take him from, Beverly Hills back into Van Nuys, illustrious Van Nuys. And it was just kind of, strange. You're hey, how you doing? I'm Paul. I'm going to take you to Sound City. All right, cool. And he just looks out the window the whole time, admiring the day because it was sunny, and it was a cool car. His arm was hanging out, and just looking out the window, because what are you going to do when you're in a car with a stranger who you don't know? Well, he sat in the front seat, not the back seat, so that was cool.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Chris was friends with Dave. Are you and Dave friends?
We're acquaintances. I wouldn't say we're friends, but, when he sees me, he's Fig, what's happening? And it's always great to see him. And, I work out as 606 too a bunch, because Nick partnered up with him, Nick Raskulinecz, before he bought the console. He had this other Neve console. I think it was an 8058. And it was an inline console. It was it was like a version after the 8068, and I don't know why it was the 58 because the number is smaller. But anyways, it was a 32 channel inline desk, and it was really fun and punchy, and had lots of cool things. And we worked out of there a bunch until after 2011, Grohl bought the Sound City desk and swapped them out. But there's been a new version of Sound City with Kevin Agunis came in, and he just took the whole place over. So everything was gone. So he just had the shell, and then he changed a few things. He redid the control room with like 1950s, like the little tiles, the acoustic tiles with the holes in it. New tiles in the drum room, which was it needed it. Yeah, and it's kind of like remodeled the inside to just update it. And then he moved out, and then this other guy came in and brought 2 Helios consoles. I'd heard some friends go in there, some other producer engineers, and they're like, I'm not digging that. And it was just hard to get in there. Then now, Blake Mills and Tony Berg are in there, and they have a Neve desk, or a Neve type desk. I think Avitas designed this, and it's supposed to be great. 24 channels of, something similar to what was in there, hopefully. I just haven't had a chance to get in there. Blake Mills and Tony just keep it booked. So it's supposed to be, I guess it's semi-private or semi-commercial, but, Bob Dylan just came out of there. He did a record. It's still an industrial complex, and, I bring my guitars as Eric's guitar, and that's right in that same complex. And Matt Wallace still has his space right across the driveway from Sound City. And there's 2 other studios. I'm not sure exactly what's happening. One was Goodnight LA, and Jackie Jackson from the Jackson 5 took that over towards the end of the time I was at the studio. And then he moved to Nevada. And I only know this because my grand piano that's at my studio now was at that studio.
That's so cool. So how long were you at Sound City?
From 2001 to 2006. I was so lucky because I started on tape, and then we kind of morphed into Pro Tools pretty quick. But I still had to have tape chops because they were still locking tape machines to Pro Tools and transferring back and forth. Like, nothing lived in Pro Tools 100% yet. So, like, hey, I just need these 11 drum tracks transferred into Pro Tools, and then some guy picks it up on a hard drive, and he comes back later on, and I have to lock it back up and dump it back on tape. And it has to be the phase coherency has to, it's got to be super tight, the lock. And, we listen to like the tape hi-hat and the Pro Tools hi-hat, and the lock has to sound like a tight phaser, basically. Like, you have to make sure that doesn't if it gets too wide and slappy, then you've dropped. And it's just, it's stressful. But, I was lucky because that helped me understand a lot of other things. And then when HD came out in the 192s, then everyone just started living all in Pro Tools. Now bands can save on, tape, one, and the time to run a tape machine. And now you're just all in tools, and that comes out, on a drive. You don't have to calibrate the next Pro Tools rig. I mean, you have to make sure whatever you're hitting your console with is either minus 18 or wherever you want that set. Other than that, you're good to go. I mean, I don't know many bands right now. It's like a band that says, we're going to record a tape. And it's like, well, you guys must have lots of money because tape is like 200 something a reel. And if you don't want to record over any of it, then you've got to buy multiple reels. But then not only that, you've got to find a decent batch of multiple reels that don't shed. That they're all part of the same batch. Even as far back as 2011, when we were doing Evanescence, we were going to record the strings to tape. So we had 2 reels. We got up to New York, and they could not keep the lock. Like, they had SMPTE timecode amplifiers. They had, the techs were working the night before, and they're like, oh, it'll be set up by, first thing, you'll be solid, first thing tomorrow. And we get up there, and, we've got the bows are up in the air, and this is like the 3rd take, and the lock keeps getting longer and longer. And finally, like, the bows are up, and I can hear, it's like 1, 2, and I'm like, abort. I'm like, I don't have lock. And it's like, I've got musicians out there that need to get to, Book of Mormon and Spider-Man and wherever, anything on Broadway at the time. It's like, they don't have time to waste on this tape machine. So we just pulled all the patches, went straight to Pro Tools, and just went ripping from there. So it was just one less thing to worry about.